Welcome to FANTI, beautiful people, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations about the gray areas in our lives. I am author of We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film. Out May 9th, Tre'vell Anderson.
And I'm happy that I think we got a cold open by accident today. Jarrett Hill, I just touched a spoon and knocked something, so that's great.
Yep, we heard it.
What food do you have nearby? Because I know you normally have food.
I do normally, but not this morning. I've just got my cup of water.
Okay.
In the name of Jesus.
I made grits and eggs, and then I had like a little parfait. Never mind.
Oh, you had a real breakfast this morning.
Oh, no, yeah. I got up and I was feeling myself this morning.
Okay. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back. I feel good. We should tell you, as you're listening to this episode, we have to tape the FANTI first, and we're taping this afterward. We are carrying in my very first minutes in this next interview. We'll get into that.
Jared is carrying.
Listen, I'm excited. I'm feeling good. We have our friend Schmidt is going to be here. We'll be talking a little bit. We have a really interesting conversation about even just like the title of AAPI, but as we're celebrating Awareness Month, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in our next segment. But I just came off of a couple of weeks of break where I was away from the majority of my work, decidedly not a vacation, but I was happy to get a bit more rest than usual and not have meetings and on-air appearances and work social events and deadlines and all that kind of stuff. And I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be happy versus being joyful and all that airy shit that we've been hearing if we were raised by Oprah, at least in part. Sometime last year or so, I was on this show talking about how I felt way too much pride in how overworked I felt and how overworked I was, and boasting too much about how I was working crazy numbers of hours and all those kinds of things. And there's kind of a no days off and grind and hustle culture that I've always been a little too influenced by. Even though I've never really used the idea of no days off, like I think that's some white supremacist bullshit that is a whole other conversation. But similarly, I think I know there have been times in my life where everyone was saying they were exhausted or tired and burnt out and angry or frustrated or confused or whatever it is. And sometimes I've unwittingly like adopted that kind of ethos, right? And like I think that we kind of do that as a culture when we're doing things together. And I've been thinking to myself and asking myself questions about whether or not I'm happy. I've been in therapy for a number of years with the same therapist now, and like we've been talking about how things have been up and down. And if you've been listening to this show for any good amount of time, I've had experience of depression and anxiety over the years and talked about that. But I was talking to my therapist about how I'm in what she's been calling remission, right, from depression, and things have been pretty good. And I've been doing this meditation app, and it asks you before your meditation all these questions about how you're feeling. And it asks you, on a scale of great to bad. And I'm like, good or great, good or... And like feeling weird about that. And it asks you if you feel happy, if you feel relaxed, if you feel whatever. And like happy is always one that is like, I don't know. And I started to have this question of whether or not I feel allowed to feel happy, right? To feel like really happy with the way my life is going or the ways that things are going. And like, again, recognizing the distinctions that we make between being happy and feeling joy and the difference. And I don't want to be happy. I want joy, all that shit. Right. But like the way that we feel about these things. And I think even as folks who work in diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of our work is centered around our trauma, our oppression, and the ways that shows up in the workplace and the ways that we can make it better. And our goal is to seemingly work ourselves out of jobs, right? Which seems impossible, but is ultimately the end goal. If we do the work well, seemingly we wouldn't be necessary. But it makes me ask the question of like, do you feel allowed to be happy? Like to really be able to like embrace joy and really be able to be happy? Because I've been like going back and forth with myself about it, unsure.
So this is a tough question. You missed that part at the beginning, friend.
Okay, first of all, by the way, this is a tough question.
That's all right. First week back. It's okay, friend. It's okay. That's what I'm here for. It's okay. We see each other. Period. Okay?
We see each other. Available May 9th.
Do I feel allowed to be happy?
Do you understand what I'm coming from with that? Like,
I think so. Let's see what my answer is, and you'll let me know. Uh, but while you were talking, I did think about, like, what?
In my mind, you're like, while you were talking, I was thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. And let me tell you, I came back and realized you were still talking.
See, I'm not you, so I actually pay attention all the way through. Mm-hmm. And so
I only feel attacked because it's not wrong.
And so while you were talking, I, as folks now know, have been working on a podcast called We See Each Other. The podcast comes out next week, y'all. And we recently were doing a recording at the Unique Women's Coalition, which is a Black trans woman led organization here in Los Angeles that does great work for the community. And we were there interviewing different community members for the podcast. And I know some of the community members that were there, trans folks, and obviously I have the book coming out, and folks were asking me, am I excited? Am I happy? Da 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 da. And while you were speaking, I took myself went back to there, because the operative word here, right, in your question is, do you feel allowed, right, to be happy? And I do think that there is a broader situation in culture where, like, one has to navigate how one articulates, being in a good place in their life, being happy, being, a variety of positive feelings. Because, right, the world is a shit show. Right. And I think there is a sentiment, a broad sentiment of of like, you want to be happy, you want to be able to articulate that you're happy, but you don't want to come off as, like, at least for me, I don't want to come off as, like, cocky. I don't want to come off as, like, there is no struggle, and I want, it's important for me for other people to know that, like, just because I feel good or am in a good place is not a comment on where the person I'm speaking to may or may not be. And so that question of, do you feel allowed to be happy? I do think that there is just a broader community cultural work to be done around giving space and allowing space for folks to be Gucci, despite whatever, like, negative stuff that they may also be facing, right? But, like, yeah, I'm also someone, last thing I'll say, I'm also someone who, like, I keep my nose down. I sort of, kind of, in terms of, like, the work, right, that is at hand. And I'm the type of person where I don't have to be happy while doing the work, because I know the joy and the feel goods and the stuff will come, once the task is done. Articulating that difference in journey for me is always interesting when talking with the more enlightened, meditative lot like yourself.
I've meditated like 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and now I'm a guru. So I just want to be clear about that.
No,
I mean, I really think I'm everything.
You're something.
And I'm also everything. And
a whole lot of something.
But also everything. There's like a I'm every woman joke here that I feel like is, like, right there, but I don't know exactly what it.
Yeah, I heard the first time you said it, but I left it alone.
Anyway, I've been thinking about this a lot, and, like, I don't, I feel like there's an awkward tension between, walking into a room where you have to do advocacy, right, on behalf of a community that is being harmed in some kind of way, and also being able to have a spring in your step, like, there's, like, and being able to be happy about, like, where life is, and having to, like, convey pain and trauma and upset and whatever. And like, there's a tension in that I've been like trying to understand. And I don't know that I'm even able to articulate it to myself all the time, but have been trying to figure out how to talk about it. We'd love to hear from y'all, what y'all think about this, and if it made sense at all. And if it didn't, then you can just fast forward. When we come back, we're talking to Schmidt. Don't go anywhere. FANTI's coming right back. Are you craving fresh, delicious, easy meals? Try Wild Grain and get their baked from frozen sourdough breads, fresh pastas, and artisanal pastries delivered right to your door. Wild Grain is the first ever baked from frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, fresh pastas, and that works too, and artisanal pastries. Unlike typical supermarket bread, Wild Grain uses a slow fermentation process that's easier on your belly, lower in sugar, and rich in nutrients and antioxidants. And every item bakes from frozen in 25 minutes or less. Plus, for every new member, Wild Grain donates 6 meals to Greater Boston Food Bank. So you can eat good and do good all at the same time. I have to tell you, Wild Grain is actually one of my very favorite things that we've gotten to try over the course of like all of our sponsor work. The bread is so fantastic. I've had so many different kinds of things from them. The pasta is delicious. And I'm always talking about my love for croissants, and the croissants are fantastic. I'm really a big fan of Wild Grain.
Yes, the croissants are great. Plus, for a limited time, you can get $30 off the first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/FANTI to start your subscription. You heard me right.
Okay, now.
Free croissant. That's croissants, by the way, in case y'all couldn't hear it. But you heard me right. Free croissants in every box and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/FANTI. That's wildgrain.com/FANTI, or you can use promo code FANTI at checkout.
Not gonna lie, when you said croissants, now it does sound weird.
Welcome back, beautiful people. As you know, on this here show, we are rooting for everybody black, or almost everybody black, because, you know, some of y'all I refuse to root for because you don't deserve it. But in the course of that rooting for everybody black, it is important for us to recognize at least 2 things. One, that black people come in all kinds of genotypic and phenotypic ways. As New York says, you gotta stand in it in all its shades. All right. And 2, that when it comes to this thing called liberation, we can't do it alone. And because we can't do it alone, solidarity is important. The month of May, in case you didn't know, is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. That is what Obama renamed it. Here's some history for you. That is what Obama renamed it in 2009. But prior, it was called Asian/Pacific American Heritage Month. And, you know, the more you know, the month of May was chosen way back when, apparently, because the first Japanese immigrant apparently arrived here in the U.S. In May of 1841. And then more than 2 decades later, in May of 1869, you know, y'all ever seen Wild Wild West, the movie Wild Wild West?
I've never heard of that.
The one with Will Smith and the white man.
I'm just kidding.
Cut it out. He's showing out. Anyway, there's a scene, you know, in which they, you know, drive a golden spike into the transatlantic railroad. That, you know, they recreated.
Is that where Cisco had the chaps on?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
He is showing out on his first day back. Anyway, that happened. That real life event happened in May of 1869. And if you don't know, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed using the labor of Chinese folks. That's what the Wikipedia said. All right. Anyway, that has very little to do with our conversation today, or maybe it has a lot to do with it. I don't know. We will find out shortly. As you do know, though, Jared and I, we do a lot of work around the diversity, equity, and the inclusion thing in the Hollywood, as I like to say. And, you know, just as Black folks are clamoring for greater representation, so are other communities. Insert PEAK, also known as the Pasifika Entertainment Advancement Committee, that's committed with a K, a nonprofit organization that looks to help creatives thrive, evolve, and drive innovative storytelling that honors the richness and diversity across Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. That is the PI in the AAPI, as I understand it. Now, Jared and I happen to know Peak's co-founder and executive director, and I have forced him to come here to share some knowledge and education with the FANTI fam, Kristian Schmidt. Welcome to FANTI.
Thank you. Actually, this is the other way around. I forced y'all to take me. I've been waiting.
You did. You did.
But I appreciate you, the little setup. The generosity has no bounds.
I just wanted to tweak the narrative just slightly.
I want to make sure that we're clear. Are we calling you Kristian? Is that what we're doing here?
Oh, well, I'm versatile. I can go by Crit or Kristian. It's up to you.
Cut it out.
I'm not touching all of that, but we see you. We see each other, actually.
We see each other. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Available May 9th.
Screaming. Okay.
So producer Palmira was asking a question about pronunciation, and it's actually something that is interesting because we've been like making sure to pronounce her name Palmira as opposed to Palmira, and she's like, I don't really care either way, but like everyone is like doing it now, and like Tre'vell is like Tre'vell, and like we've been like thinking about pronunciation in all these different places, and we hear the ways that you pronounce Samoa, and we want to make sure that we pronounce it correctly, but also don't want to feel like we're being like those people, like, okay girl, we get it, you know how to pronounce the word. Like there's like a weird line in there of like how to pronounce something the correct way and how to like to say it. So how would you say it, and how should we be thinking about that?
I love that you take the time to say Samoa. I appreciate it, and I think a lot of Samoans would appreciate it. But on that note, like it's not uncommon to even find Samoans who live in the US who pronounce it the way that white Americans pronounce it, right? So I think that's kind of perpetuates why a lot of people still pronounce it that way. And this is a sad thing, right? With a lot of diasporic communities is once you move to another country, you kind of lose a bit of your culture. You don't necessarily, and I'm speaking for myself. I don't speak Samoan. And so there are a lot of words that I might not pronounce correctly or have the right, intonations or whatever. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for you to come across a Samoan who says Samoa as well. So
that's also what the Girl Scout cookies is called.
They sure are.
Not doing that with you. Not doing that with you. We're not doing that. The thing that's interesting is we had this conversation on KCRW when I was hosting Greater LA. We had a conversation about Los Feliz versus Los Feliz, right? And I'm like, they wanted me to say Los Feliz on the air. And I was like, I'm not saying that. It's Los Feliz, right? Like Feliz is a name that is named after a person, and his name was not Feliz, right? Like white people came in and
Feliz Navidad.
Not doing that with you either. But like the way we pronounce things is always interesting to me. And like Los Feliz, it is named after a person, and Feliz was his name. But Feliz is something that people like to say, or they feel more comfortable, or it's easier, or whatever it is. And so this is an interesting one.
So we got to say Samoa. Did I say that right?
No, you said sour moa. That is not what it is.
Not sour. This ain't a gummy.
I didn't say sour. I said Samoa.
This ain't a candy snack. Sour moa? Damn. Wait, I gotta give it up to Jared because I made a post recently about my mom and my cousin Fitamali, and Jared was like, "Oh," Jared jumped on and was like, "This is my time to shine. I'm gonna have a go at pronouncing your cousin's name." He's like, "Is this right? Is this right?" And to his credit, he said Fitamali, right? So I was like, "All right, Jared, linguist. We got a polyglot."
Listen, I don't even have like a difficult name, but my name is spelled irregularly with 2 R's and 2 T's. And so I'm always paying attention to how people's names are spelled. And when I get it wrong, I really feel a way about it. And when I pronounce it incorrectly, I feel a way about it.
People assume that because my name starts with K that it's a girl's name. And so like people all the time was like, Christine. I'm like, just because it has a K doesn't mean it can't be Christian.
Interesting.
That was just I had to throw that in there. Just to be like, I got issues too.
So today's episode might be a little different than others because
we are showing out.
You are showing out.
We have been carrying for like 10 minutes before even getting on the air.
This is just a reminder. This is Jared's first episode back after a couple weeks, so he's showing out for y'all.
Listen,
anyway,
I'm in it. I'm ready.
Okay, come on. So today's episode, might be a little different than others. As two Black folks with no Asian or Pacific heritage
that you know of.
Although I asked Jared yesterday when we were pre-producing this episode. I asked him if because I wanted to be inclusive. I said, is any chance you have any, Asian, Pacific Islander, heritage?
I just want to say, I said, actually, I do. And I said, let me go open my 23andMe app. And Tre'vell said, don't come in here telling me that you 1% something. And I said, no, I'm not 1% something. I'm 0.5% something East Asian, and it's very non-specific. So, we've got representation on panel here.
Cut it out. So I really basically wanted to be kind of real nosy first, kind of do some stage setting for the FANTI fam as it relates to, in particular, Pacific Islander communities, representation, culture, information. And then we're going to get a little messy and but real and talk about anti-blackness within you all's community. But to get us started, Crit, I just went through in reading the description of your organization. I talked about Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. Now, I did not do so well in geography. And so I assume that others may have not done so well in geography. So do us a favor and just talk to us a little bit about who all falls under the, PI, Pacific Islander umbrella. Make it plain for us, please.
Yeah, sure. So I always do this, right? I always like to go back to basics because most people don't know it. That's a big role of Peak, right? As we go out, we educate the studios, the streaming services, and we start with what is a Pacific Islander. First of all, I want to even Pacific, right? The region was named the Pacific or the Pacific Ocean because, again, a white, discoverer, as they call them, traveled through the Pacific Ocean and said, "Oh, this is so peaceful. The people are so peaceful." He ended up getting his ass speared with a bamboo. They killed him at the end of the day.
Well, hold on now.
That took a turn.
Exactly. So that's where we got the name Pacific. And then as far as the regions that make up a Pacific Islander, it's Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. Another white discoverer came through and was like, Polynesia, poly meaning many, not your poly, but poly as in many islands.
I don't know how. I'm not poly. Okay, you know what? Right? Like, I'm not even poly. Like, go ahead.
All of these stray bullets.
Many islands, Polynesia, Micronesia, micro meaning small, because they were small islands. And then Melanesia, because melanin, he was like, I see black people. And that's how Melanesia got the name. So real problematic terms that we still use today. Yeah.
Oh my God. Whiteness is
so awful.
So awful.
I hate them. No, I'm sorry.
It is an illness.
Y'all are wild. It's all the spoken and unspoken, the whispers and whatnot. Y'all do know we recorded, right? Both of you.
I feel like this is our most, like, when we have friends on the show, it's always a lot more like, girl, so then, like, it's a whole other kind of conversation. But yes, go ahead. Sorry.
It's a mess. Okay. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask, one of the stage setting questions is about the label, the AAPI label, Asian American Pacific Islands. We speak a lot on this show, as you know, about identity and labels around race and gender and sexuality and all of this. But as you and I were talking before, I found this bit interesting, which I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but it's like, the AAPI label is like, it's actually only an American, like a US concept. Talk more about that.
Yeah, so AAPI doesn't exist outside of America. What happened was back in the late 70s, 80s, during the census, you could only have so many categories to identify as, right? And so there were around 2 million Asians at the time within the US and only a couple 100,000 Pacific Islanders. And so to prevent us from being categorized as other and just not having any kind of identity box to check at all, they combined us with the Asian communities. And, and the intention was solidarity, right? Fast forward, that was like 40 years. Now our population is about the size of the Asian community back then. We're around 2 million now, and they are 20 million plus. And it's just outdated. Like, we've outgrown it. And to be honest, like, if you look around, most AAPI organizations, they're really just Asian. Like, it's very rare to find Pacific Island board members or even staff members within a lot of organizations. So it's another big part of Peak's role, is to fill that void and be like, hey, we are a Pacific-led organization, and we'd like to take control of our own narratives, because right now, most people are looking to API organizations for guidance and for consultancies and all that sort of stuff.
Now, why do you think that is? That the AAPI organizations seemingly are not necessarily representing the PI. Is it a population thing? Is it something else?
I was at Creating Change earlier this year, and this is the first time I heard someone like just be really honest about it. They were like, "Hey, they were a queer organization based in New York where there isn't a large Pasifika community." So Pasifika is a transliteration of Pacific. It's what a lot of us use instead of Pacific Islander. So New York, there isn't a large Pasifika community. It's too cold out there. Our people don't want to be around the cold. And basically, he was Asian, and he said, we've basically inherited this. The name of our organization has API in it. We've inherited this, and we don't know what to do about it because we don't have any PIs. And is it okay for us to take it out of the name or take it out of the organization? I was like, that's fine. No one's gonna get mad at you for not erasing us, because that ends up doing more harm than anything else, right? So I think for a lot of people, it's a case where, the organization's roots go back to a time where the term was, popularized, which it is still now, but it's just been inherited, and people don't know what to do about it. They're like, our focus is the Asian community, which is okay, but they don't know if it's problematic to split it. Like, is that even worse off, sort of thing? Is that doing more harm by completely cutting us out? But for us, I'm like, yo, just do it. You can still show that solidarity without having that acronym, right? Like, you can still help uplift our voices. You can still, bring us into rooms whenever you can.
Especially if you're not going, why have it in your name, in your mission, and you're not going to program towards it, right? Or be intentional about including those voices, those perspectives. Jared, you had something?
Yeah, no, I mean, the piece about Asian American only being something that we have in America, I may have talked about this here before, but I worked on a cruise ship for a brief time, and I was making reference to the...
Yes, you have talked about that here before multiple times.
Well, I haven't heard it personally, so you can tell us all you want, Jared.
That means you ain't been listening to the show, so you need to start listening to the show.
I was making a point.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was making reference to the Black folks from other countries, right? We had 45, 50 countries represented between 1,000 different crew members. But the folks that came from Western countries tended to group together: the Canadians, the Americans, the Brits, right? And there were about 20 of us total from the three. And I was making reference to a Black person from Britain, and I almost said African American. And I was like, well, no, you wouldn't be African American. You'd be African Brit. I don't think that's a thing. And I was trying to figure out what the language was. And it's been interesting to me that as I hear you talk about Asian American only really being a thing that we do here, and how that kind of happened. Tre'vell mentioned earlier that we wanted to talk about anti-Blackness and the ways that shows up in community. And how do you even think about how that shows up within community?
I can speak to the Samoan culture because my family's from Samoa. So, sorry, just a little bit of background. I was born and raised in Aotearoa, otherwise known as New Zealand, but my parents are of Samoan descent, so they're both immigrants. So I'm first generation Samoan, New Zealand-born Samoan. So a term that's widely used by Samoans, very commonly used, I should say, is meoli, which translates to black thing, and that's what we use to describe African Americans. It's what we describe. It's often used as an insult for people with darker skin tones, right? And that dates back to when.
Not y'all got y'all own N-word.
I mean, you're not wrong.
What? Ain't that? That's what I heard.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Sorry. That's what I heard.
I'm not touching it.
When we go back to where it comes from, that's even worse, right? I mean, I don't know if it's worse, but it makes sense in the worst way. So in the 1800s, when Germany was colonizing Samoa, we went from living off the land to now these large scale plantations, right? And so to work the plantations, they brought in indentured laborers. This is the softened, I guess, term that they use for what are essentially slaves, right?
For those who can't see Crit, he is using air quotes, FYI.
For indentured laborer, right? They brought in indentured laborers from the Solomon Islands, which is one of the islands of Melanesia. And so these were darker skinned laborers, and the Germans coined the term meoli to describe them, black things. So ever since from back then, we haven't let go of that term. And again, colonization, our country, a lot of Pacific nations are heavily influenced by the church, and so it's just a term that there's a lot of resistance to about letting go, because it is a very conservative culture now, because that's just the nature of culture changes, and now we are so heavily tied to a lot of white supremacist ideals, and yeah, it's one thing that we try to work towards dismantling within the work.
One of the questions that I'm stealing your question, Jared, FYI, because it feels appropriate for this moment. One of the questions that Jared had mentioned yesterday was like how, and correct me if I say this wrong, Jared.
I'm actually really curious about how you're gonna say it, because you told me that the way I was saying it was not something I should say. So go ahead on.
Publicly, yes. But when we talk about anti-blackness, right? Like anti-blackness isn't just like everybody can be anti-black, right? And
anti-blackness is for everyone.
It is. Anti-blackness is for everyone, okay? Including black folks, right? But like when we talk about, I remember when, and I hope this is related, I remember in the immediate aftermath of the first year of Oscar So White, how folks assumed that because it was Oscar So White that, April Reign's intention was to like specifically advocate for black people. And at that time, there was I'll be generous and say, small collective of Asian American folk in the industry, in particular, because that's where I was, who, for lack of a better word, were like, oh, well, the Asian representation's bad too. Like, we need to be focusing on the Asian representation, right? And so there often ends up being a pitting against each other of like, is it black power, or is it, whatever the, Asian American solidarity, language is. Notice I did not say Pacific Islander on purpose, but there's always that, push and pull of like whose rights or whose visibility or whose representation, takes precedent, right, over another. And so we always end up playing the oppression Olympics. And I have said that, right, we shouldn't be competing to see, whose oppression is worse than the other. Oppression, period, is, the evil that needs to be rooted out. However, I am interested, and I think Jared was also interested, because again, this was his question, about how
by the way, ate it. Yes.
I know it's long, y'all, but I'm going somewhere with it, I promise.
Oh my God. No, I fell asleep and woke up and I was like, oh, I think this works. But go ahead.
My point is, being aware of the history and, still contemporary anti-blackness that shows up in your community. How do you navigate that as you are advocating on behalf of more images of and better images of your folks, while also not perpetuating, right, the anti-blackness that is often seen as, cultural, that is often seen as culture for various communities.
Like cultural appropriation is what you're saying?
Yes, I think cultural appropriation falls in it, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you mentioned that, for example, the Melanesian Islands, like the name, right, comes from there being black people on the island and the white man saying, oh, black Melanesia, whatever, right? Like that to me, that is anti-Blackness baked into, right, the very foundation of kind of that space's identification, at least using, that particular language. And so if anti-Blackness as manifested in that way, or to bring up cultural appropriation, anti-Blackness as manifested in cultural appropriation is so foundational to seemingly the culture, the community, the world. How does one go about like advocating for the advancement, right, but also like not replicating or perpetuating, those harms?
Got you. Yeah. No, I feel you. So a big part of it is, okay, so I want to preface that it's going back to anti-Blackness, right? When we think of Pacific Island representation, it's usually just Samoan and Hawaiian, right? And those are two islands of Polynesia. There are actually 7 million. The population of Papua New Guinea alone in Melanesia is 7 million. So there are more Black Pacific Islanders than any other islanders in the Pacific, right? But we never get to see those images. And so a big part of Peak's mission, for me, was making sure that our board has Melanesian representation. The panel that we have coming up has Kerry Walkia, who's part of our board, but is also sitting on the panel. And her work actually features a lot of Melanesian representation. Like, for instance, she has a film called Vi, which is available on Amazon Prime. And it's the first time that I ever got to see dark-skinned mothers, daughters, grandmothers, women, and like on screen like that. Like, we've never gotten to see that because that narrative is just erased, right? So I think that's how we're trying to navigate it, is just being as inclusive as possible and intentional when it comes to the way we present ourselves, and just naming those things every step of the way. And that comes from, honestly, my relationship with my friends and family in the Black community, and the influence that they've had on me throughout my studies and throughout my just the love that we have, And so I think that's played a big part in how I approach the work.
Love that answer.
I feel like when we were talking about this in our meeting yesterday, I was saying to Tre'vell that I'm always interested in understanding how folks from other races think about how there is some sort of like oppression Olympics that oftentimes puts Black folks in the forefront of conversations about race, and kind of defers to other communities as secondary or even further down the list sometimes. And so to hear this piece about like there are actually more Black folks in this area that you're speaking of, and where was it that you said that was?
The Pacific in general. There are more Black Pacific Islanders than
in the Pacific in general
than any other, than Micronesians and Polynesians combined. There are more Melanesians.
That's amazing. I think about the ways that anti-Blackness shows up, right? And we have all these conversations right now about the ways that we're teaching about race in the world, in our culture and around the country, and the ways that we're trying to erase a lot of Blackness out of culture and out of our teaching more specifically. And it's kind of alarming to me that this kind of information I've never heard before, right? And I mean, it's taken aback. Go ahead, Tre'vell.
Speaking of anti-Blackness.
Oh no.
Anxiety level dial just turned up a little.
Y'all have got to bear with me. My mind went somewhere, but I'm not going to use that transition because that's problematic. What I wanted...
I knew exactly where you was going to.
Oh, but I don't. Oh.
It's fine. I want to talk a little bit about... I have become, a lot more knowledgeable and aware of, like, in particular, like Native Hawaiian culture, the ways that, Native Hawaiians and their culture are being, denigrated and further marginalized and whatnot in Hawaii because of one of the associate producers on What a Day, Raven Yamamoto, is Native Hawaiian. And so we've done a lot of like news stories about oil leaks over there and how, the U.S. government don't care and the people's, water and, natural wildlife, compromised, have been compromised for decades at this point. And one of the things that they and I had a recent conversation about was the casting for Lilo and Stitch. They're doing I don't know if you know this, Jared, they're doing a live action Lilo and Stitch. And they recently announced the casting. And one of the things that Raven noted to me was, you also noted this to me, Crit, was the, presentation of the folks who have been cast in the principal roles for this story, and how they are a lot lighter than, the skin tone of the cartoon. And I think there are people who will say it's a cartoon, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, but hearing the context that you have just provided us, Crit, about the prevalence, right, of Black folks in this community, it seems to me interesting, to say the least, right, about the ways that they went about the casting decisions. And I think we can also talk about, right, the, who's auditioning or has had access to the auditions. And, like, we can go down a long list of caveats about how they ended up getting to the decision that they got to. And this is also no shade on the actresses who were cast in those particular roles, right? It's not about them. It's about systemic issues. But I say all that to say, I wonder, you mentioned that film that the young person did that has all of these Black, Pasifika folks in it.
She would love to hear you say young.
Cut it out.
Was she not? I mean, she's not young, you know what I'm saying? Like, but she's,
young in spirit, young in heart.
There we go. I was like, oh, young. All right. She gonna love that.
But I guess my question is, when you see, those instances, right, in which, like, your culture, the community is getting center stage treatment, in particular ways, but perhaps the, final rendering is not, the most representative or perhaps what we expected. How do you all navigate, uplifting a work in a project like that while also noting, the systemic stuff that is also at play here?
So I think one thing that Peak really pushes for is being part of the process from the casting stage, because colorism exists across the board, and again, Hollywood is so its foundations are rooted in white supremacy, right? And so that is always going to be an issue, no matter what ethnicity they're going to cast. That's always going to be an issue. Right now, what we're doing is building relationships with the studios so that we can create that change behind the scenes, because I think there's kind of two sorts of roles that one can play, or maybe both. And that's either one as a watchdog, or two as, someone who, and this is I got this from a colleague who described it as like kind of dangling the carrot, and that's really rewarding the content that does it right, and then kind of just not really speaking out about the content that doesn't do it right. And so I think that's what we're sort of leaning towards is like, if it really requires it, then yeah, we're going to come out strong and be like, this is something that we are not going to support. But otherwise, we're just going to do the work behind the scenes that people might not necessarily know about, but that's going to help affect the change. Now, how we do that is still, we're still a very new organization. We're still working it out. But, fingers crossed, we can really help to get the needle moving, because Hollywood is becoming more and more obsessed with Pacific Island stories, and it's like, you can't have these stories without our input and without someone who wants to make sure we're not, perpetuating these problematic narratives and stereotypes, and again, the anti-Blackness, the homophobia, the transphobia that is still that still has us in a chokehold.
I feel like we see the same conversation. We had this conversation about the film adaptation being lighter skinned about In the Heights just about a year and a half ago, right? When we saw it go from the stage to screen, and like seeing
Oh
how
yeah.
everybody was a lot fairer skinned in the movie than we'd seen in other castings. And like
They put the black people in the background, they said.
they did. And like it's a common thing that we're like, okay, this happens in so many of our communities, and like we have to be able to kind of use each other's experiences as like, this is why this is a problem, this is why we can't do this again, this is why we've got to move differently. Crit, tell people where they can find out more about all of the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So we're on Instagram. I'm always like, man, did I pick the right acronym or whatever, handle? Because one, when I go to say it, nobody can understand my damn accent, and then two, it's not the easiest word to spell. But on both Instagram it's Peak Pasifika, so PEAKPASIFIKA. And then our website's the same, peakpacifica.org. You can go on there. We are a nonprofit, so if you want to give us some of that, if you're rich like our co-hosts on here.
Wait a minute now.
Cut it out.
Not naming who.
I don't know who these co-hosts are. I don't know who you're talking about because it's not me.
You must be talking about the read.
No,
it's a tax write-off. You can.
it is not me.
So Peak Pacifica on Instagram and peakpacifica.org.
We'll make sure to have the links in the episode notes for people to be able to connect over to you. We want to hear from y'all about this conversation. Hit us up on social media using the hashtag FantiFam. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and the TikTok machine at Fanti Podcast. Coming up, why y'all hate us so much in our listener feedback and dishonorable mentions. Don't go anywhere. Coming right back.
Hey, when you listen to podcasts, it really just comes down to whether or not you like the sound of everyone's voices. My voice is one of the sounds you'll hear on the podcast Dr. Game Show, and this is the voice of co-host and fearless leader Joe Firestone.
This is a podcast where we play games submitted by listeners, and we play them with callers over Zoom we've never spoken to in our lives. So that is basically the concept of the show. Pretty chill.
So take it or leave it, bucko. And here's what some of the listeners have to say.
It's funny, wholesome, and it never fails to make me smile.
I just started listening and I'm already binging it. I haven't laughed this hard in ages. I wish I discovered it sooner.
You can find Dr. Game Show on MaximumFun.org.
The following pro wrestling contest is scheduled for one fall. Making their way to the ring from the Tights and Fights podcast are the baddest trio of audio, the hair to beware, Danielle Radford.
It really is. Great hair.
The Brit with a permit to hit, Lindsay Kell.
The Queen is dead. Long live the Queen.
And the fast-talking, fist-clocking Hal Upland.
See, I can wrestle and be an announcer.
Get ready for tights and fight.
Listen every Saturday or face the pain.
Find us on Maximum Fun. Now ring the bell.
Welcome back, beautiful people. The time is now to get into our listener feedback segment, where we read out your emails, your tweets, your DMs, and you tell us your wonderful thoughts. First up, we have an email from Jari here. Says, had to pause the pod at the YA conversation. Okay, so this is a few episodes back. We talked about, I think I was talking about somebody wanting me or us to do something for a YA audience.
Yeah, they wanted us to do a YA version of the podcast, I think, or something like that.
Oh, yeah, something like that. Had to pause the pod at the YA conversation because I can see a fabulous coffee table book edited by you providing tips on entertaining and etiquette for young people. It would be beyond.
I don't know. I see. Now I think too practically about selling books because historically Black Phrases was supposed to be a coffee table book at first, and they told me it would be too expensive to produce and we wouldn't be able to sell enough of them. So now every time I hear coffee table book, I'm like, well, who's the target audience and what would the price point be? And that's how my brain works now. Sorry. You were saying.
Yeah, that's an interesting way for your brain to work. I think that it could be cute. I think, I do feel like people are getting back to, like, I feel like this is a post-pandemic thing. I feel like people are getting back into, and maybe are already back into just like in-person things, whether that's going to concerts, whether that's, things in groups. I feel like people want to do that more. Dinners and like, house parties and stuff like that. And so I could see us taking our approach to something on entertaining and etiquette. Because I am a Southern belle. Now I don't know which fork go in. They say go from the outside and go to the inside, but I'm just gonna grab whatever's closest. Personally,
I'm intrigued by this. I also do think that whenever I hear people talking about etiquette, etiquette is always one of those things that feels. I think you and I have said before, when you walk into a space or when you're inhabiting a space and you can feel the racism, but you really can't point it out or name it. Maybe that's the institutional racism. There's something about etiquette that just has
But that's why
a film of...
Absolutely. But that's why us doing it, right, would, it would freak it, right?
It's like Monique hosting Charm School.
Very that. Okay, remember when she was ready to fight, was it Pumpkin? She wanted to fight Pumpkin. Anyway, she said, now you done pissed me off.
She's taking it. You know what? I think I had talked myself out of this and now back into it. Great idea. We're working on it.
You're welcome. We will not be giving you any kind of percentage for the idea.
Listen.
Moving on. We have an email here from Jennifer. This is actually part of the of Jennifer's email, and she says, "I would like your opinion about this bit about Lululemon and their sign that says, 'We don't support racism, sexism, discrimination, or hate.' How do you feel when a company puts up a sign like that? The cynic in me thinks that's nice. You put up a sign, but are you actually making the changes needed to improve the situation? ? By the way, I did a quick look at Lululemon's website. For women's sizes, they only go up to size 20. I guess it's okay to discriminate against big girls who do yoga. P.S. There are other companies who make plus size activewear that are well made and cost a lot less." So Jared, how do you feel about, companies putting up signs like "We don't support racism, sexism, discrimination, or hate"?
I feel the same way that you feel on this one. It makes me think about Starbucks when we saw the black folks like kicked out of Starbucks and they closed down the store and did all this other shit. And like, so often in my experience, and I can't say that is the truth more broadly, but like oftentimes when conversations around advocacy or wanting to be better as a company or as people, when those conversations begin, it often happens in the communications department, which is just always interesting to me, right? About the ways that we message what we do as opposed to who we are. And so to me, this is one of those things where it's "We don't support racism, sexism, discrimination, or hate" is great messaging. But I'm really curious about like what we're doing to like really build that up. We're clear on how we want to look better, but are we clear about how we want to be better so that we don't have to go hire somebody to give us language on how to respond to something. So we don't have to go hire somebody outside to be able to come and figure out what's wrong with us. Like, we need to be doing this work. And I want to be clear, consultants are really important to that work, right? So hire somebody, but like recognize that this messaging is oftentimes about messaging and not necessarily about being.
I feel the same way about these signs as I feel about all y'all signs that are in y'all's, yards that say Black Lives Matter, but you ain't got no black friends. So, do with that what you will. Now it's time for our dishonorable mentions. These are the stories of people that caught our attention this week that deserve a call out either for their good or their foolish. Jared, I don't have any this week because I saw that you had 12. And so I decided I would let you, unleash the beast, if you will.
Okay, so I don't have 12. I have 11 and a half, but I'll get started. I actually had a list of about 12, but I only picked out a few. I was like, I can spread it out because I've been gone for a couple of weeks. I just want to give an honorable mention to the term unserious.
You're welcome.
I am thoroughly enjoying the use of unserious in popular culture. Tre'vell, I don't even remember what I said yesterday, but I'm going to keep talking because I see you have something that you want to say, and I'm not going to...
Back like you never left.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've been using Unserious a lot since last summer when I did that critics camp that I was gone for 2 weeks for, because there's a group of the colors. We started a text chain, and one of the members of the text chain, she's a critic. Her name is Gloria. And Gloria kept noting things that were just like so unserious in, like, you know, us talking to the white people kept asking us about, you know, about our feelings of, you know, them watching and critiquing Black art and how we felt about it and stuff like that. And so Gloria kept saying, y'all are so unserious. And so we started a group chat with me, Gloria, and then 2 other folks of color, and we called it the Unserious Collective. And so I've been using it since then. But okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I think Unserious is just, I feel like I've been seeing it in a lot of places. I've never heard you use it before, so I won't give you credit, but I will say that it just is. I just think it's fantastic. Anyway, I want to do something that I don't feel like a lot of other shows tend to do. I want to shout out a few other shows, giving some honorable mentions to a few friends who have shows. And up first is Haley Marie Norman. She has a new podcast called Date Mare, which is about going on nightmare dates, on dates with folks that end up turning out crazy after having some crazy experiences herself. And so you can check out Date Mare wherever you get podcasts, and go check out Haley's new show. I also want to shout out Tiffany D. Lofton. I met Tiffany back in 2016, shortly after breaking the Melania Michelle plagiarism story, while kind of being out and attending a lot of events. And Tiffany and I have been friends for a number of years. She has a brand new podcast called How We Get Free. She's a fantastic activist and has been doing amazing work in community. And if you're interested in checking out her new show, you can also get that wherever you get podcasts. I want to shout out The Read. We've talked about The Read here on the show before, and the past couple of weeks they were going to be going on their 10th anniversary tour, and decided to cancel the tour due to some things happening from the way that it read with Kid Fury. Kid Fury is a person who has also experienced depression and anxiety throughout the course of the time, seemingly throughout the course of their life, but certainly throughout the course of the podcast. And so I just wanted to send love to the Read team, because they've canceled their tour and are clearly going through some things right now. So to Kid Fury and to Crissle and the whole squad over there making that happen, the Loudspeaker Network, the whole family of shows, just wanted to send love and support to them. Finally, I want to give a shout out to the Sherry Shepherd Show, who picked up 4 Emmy nominations while I was away on break, for host, hair and makeup, wardrobe and costume, and digital promotion. A lot of folks on that team are getting their first Emmy nominations, and it's a really big deal for a lot of Black folks, actually. But like for that whole team, congratulations. Sherry is the show. I feel like I've been watching a good amount of Sherry while I've been away on break, and I'm really just proud of them and excited for them. Now it is time for
Black history is happening every day.
I'm always taken aback by how long you hold that. It's a lot.
It's called stamina.
Oh, honey. Are you like taking a kind of honey or something for that?
It's natural.
Oh. This is becoming a Dipsy ad, and I'm uncomfortable. We want to give a shout out to Asia Jackson, an Afro-Filipina and creator of the hashtag Maganda Morinex, I believe is how we say that, the hashtag dedicated to challenging colorist beauty standards in the Asian community. Jackson, who has a Filipina mother and an African-American father, is a native Angelino, model and actress who made headlines in 2017 for her hashtag and movement, which translates to beautiful brown person in Tagalog. After seeing how colorism in media affected both her cultural communities, Jackson took to social media with the hashtag, and other brown-skinned Filipinos of all genders used it to celebrate their beautiful brown skin all over Instagram and Twitter. So shout out to Asia Jackson.
What did I say moments ago? You gotta stand in it in all of its shades.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Before we go, we have something very special for you and brand new coming up next week. Tre'vell looks like they want to say something, so I'm going to continue yet again.
The erasure.
We See Each Other, the podcast. hosted by Tre'vell Anderson, and Shar Jocelyn will be debuting next week. And we are very excited to bring this podcast to you in support of Tre'vell's new book coming out on May 9th.
Yes. And I will repeat that. The book comes out May 9th. All right. The podcast, We See Each Other, the podcast also comes out on May 9th. Super excited to have, our FANTI MVP, Shar Jocelyn, joining me for that experience. It's going to be great. Also, if any of you out there are in the New York area and would like to join me for my first book signing, that will also be happening next week on May 11th at 6:30 at the Barnes & Noble in Brooklyn on Atlantic Avenue. It is an open event and whatnot. I'll be in conversation with my good sister, Fatima Jamal. And you all should, pop on by. Come get your book and get your book signed. If you are in the New York area. That's it.
I just want to say the book came in the mail the other day, and I'm so fucking proud of you.
Oh.
As I'm like flipping through the pages. Oh, you didn't see that coming?
I did it.
No, I remember our first conversation about the idea of you writing a book, and it was nothing like this book. And I know that you have had a journey to writing
Tell me about
this book specifically, but just like writing in general. And like, so to hold the book in my hand and to see your name across it and to flip through the pages and to put it on the shelf here and to be able to like have it in the background as I'm going through the week and all that, like, I'm just really proud of you. And I know that you've worked so hard to make this book happen and got up and wrote every morning like clockwork in a way that I just cannot do. And so I just want to take a moment and like celebrate you and the work that you did to be able to get to this moment, because it has been a long time coming and a labor of love, and I almost took you out, girl, but you are here nonetheless.
Nevertheless, I persisted. Okay. I do want to note for the people right before we get out. Well, thank you. I should say thank you. You, yes, celebrate me, honor me, all of that. Give me my flowers. Thank you. But so I have not seen Jared while he has been on his break, y'all. Okay. Because when you friends and you work with your friends, sometimes it just be a lot, right? So I have not seen Jared since I got my books in hand, and so I had to mail Jared. Jared lived, 30 minutes from me. Okay. I had to mail Jared the book so he could get it while he was on vacation. I was like, oh, maybe, no, not vacation, excuse me. He was on break.
Thank you.
As I said, let me go and just, pop it into FedEx, have the FedEx take it down to Inglewood, Anyway, let's go.
Well, no, I mean, Tre'vell has messaged me a couple of times while I've been away, and like, the message will always start
be like, this is not work.
Not work. Except, and I'm going to say this and then I'm going to be through, which is very Baptist preacher. So we probably got 20 minutes left. You sent me the song, and I remember thinking to myself, like, it almost made me cry. The song is by Never Ending Nina, who's been on the show before. She did our episode, I think it was called Is R&B Dead? That was with Michael Kilgore. And you sent it to me, and I opened it, and I was like in the bathroom, and like I heard it, and like I had like chills on my arms, because it made me think about the way that your vision for this book has grown into something that is so much bigger than you, right? And it is bigger than the show, it is bigger than this podcast, it's bigger than this book. And to hear Nina's voice and to hear it echo, and like it made me like start to cry. And so I was really excited. And you were like, this is not work. Well, it's kind of related to work, but you don't have to do anything, but I just wanted you to hear it. And so the song is really, really beautiful and all of that stuff. So I'm excited for y'all to get to check out We See Each Other, the podcast, next week.
You can go ahead over on to, your wherever you are listening to us right now, We See Each Other, the podcast. Go ahead and search it. Go ahead, subscribe. We have a trailer up right now. You'll get a tease of the theme music that Jared has just mentioned, and you'll hear the full thing in the first episode next week.
Yes, please go subscribe right now so you can get those new episodes as they come out. And shout out to Shar for being a part of it. I'm really excited. So anyway, if you are new to the show, watching us on YouTube, we've got 3 seasons of shows to go check out. If this is brand new to you and you're loving all of this here, great. Go fantipodcast.com. You can check out all of our past content and get in on that. If you have a comment or suggestion about this week's show, you can hit us up on the social medias at Fanti Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and use the hashtag FantiFam, and we'll jump in on that conversation. You can email us to fanti@maximumfun.org. We just did a mailbag episode last week, and we've always got your stuff coming into the show.
Absolutely. As always, if you would like to be a financially contributing member of all of this wondrousness that we bring you every week, and that now you will be getting twice a week because of We See Each Other, the podcast, you can support us by going to MaximumFun.org/join and becoming a member. As always, our music is brought to you by Corrice, the Grammy Award-winning Corrice, who has a new music video and single that they just dropped with Honey D, with the legendary Honey Dijon. Okay, check him out. Check them out.
Song is called Stand. I thought you missed it, so I wanted to.
I did. I couldn't remember it, but it's called Stand. Okay, with Honey Dijon, the legendary, iconic Honey Dijon, and you can check all of that out by searching him COR.ECE wherever you get wonderful music. Our graphics are by Ashley Nguyen and the folks over at Moonhouse Creative. Our editor is Anne Marie Huber. Our producer is Palmira Muniz. Oh, that one sounded like it was dying.
Is that better? Look, we're trying to give you some progression here, okay? We're trying to show you growth. Give you something to edit at the end of the year and watch it have grown. Our singer producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.